So I'll give you a little background on why I was pretty excited about this. Chiasma is in Jerusalem, so I have an awfully long commute. It's a 6,000-mile commute. To give you a little better view of what I've done all over the world, because in the pharmaceuticals area and biotech, it's not just knowledge in the U.S. that's important, it's outside the U.S. as well. And I've located the names as close as I can to where they physically are. BioMarin was actually in San Francisco, so I moved out there and ran that firm for a while. Applied Microbiology, which is Enobia and Regeneron, Pharmasset, BioMarin are all public companies. And then Bruce mentioned Enobia. I'm on the board of Enobia. We're about to sell this company. I can't say too much about that. It's a private company. We've been involved in that for quite a long time. Zymenex is a company I don't put on my CV. It just gets to be too big, but I was chairman of that. That's in Copenhagen. Everybody speaks English in Denmark. I don't have to learn other than say to your health or skull. You don't need any other words in Danish. And two companies in Israel. Omrix, which is located in 3 sites. You're going to see one in Jerusalem, which is 2 streets away from where we are in Chiasma. So a little bit about what we're going to do. A little brief introduction, talk to you about the fact that success is not preordained. A lot of people think that in biotech you follow a certain rule, and if you follow the rules you'll become successful. Yes, but maybe 5% of the time. Enormous failure rate in biotech. There's also a failure rate in software and high tech. It's very, very high. These are risky businesses. Tell a little bit about the real world and how to build value, which is very important. And one of the things I noticed you had a copy of the state of the art. What's it? The Art of the State. I actually read that book. The other one, of course, I read, but that one I didn't think I was going to like. I liked it a lot. And there's a lot of things in there which I brought into building value, and a couple of things are important lessons at the end. I'd like to make this interactive, so to the extent that you have questions, do not be embarrassed, just ask. If you have comments, just shout them out. It's perfectly okay. But there are only a few things that if you take away from tonight, I'll feel really good about it, and this is one of them. So I have 3 circles. It's a Venn diagram, standard Venn diagram. Authority, influence, and responsibility. Does anybody have any idea what happens? What word you would use to describe that gray area in the middle when they all overlap?
Expert.
Okay, it's kind of contained in the word that's the real word, but that's a good start. Anybody else?
Manager?
No. But I'm going to be talking a lot about management.
Market leader?
Nope. This is more related to people. So,
Leader?
what happens? Go on.
Leader.
Yes, leader's embedded in the word I'm looking for. I'm gonna tease this out of you because it's incredibly important. If you go to a meeting in business, and somebody at that meeting says, I'll take care of that afterwards. That's my job. Which of the 3 things, I'm going to use he, but it could be a she. Which of the 3 things is he referring to? That's my job.
Responsibility.
Responsibility, right. Somebody else asks a question, that same guy says, I've been listening to you. I know the CEO. I'm going to go talk to him about that. What's that?
Influence.
That's influence. And authority is the person that if he says, you know, when it comes time to actually funding this, I'm the guy who's going to sign. I'm going to write the budget. I'm going to give it the okay. And that is obviously authority. If somebody has responsibility and influence, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to go talk to the CEO. doesn't have any authority. What is he missing? Any idea? What doesn't he have? When you put all these together, he doesn't have this. What's the one thing you want? It's an action verb. Well, it's the noun too.
Power.
Power. That's exactly right. If you don't have power, which is a combination of these three things, you don't have anything. So this is incredibly important. People think that the word authority is power, or they think responsibility is power. It's 1/3 of what's necessary. Now I'm going to tell you a true story. I graduated Dartmouth before any of you were born, by many years. And I was in a class in which this Venn diagram was put up. And we were freshmen, and there must have been 300 people in the class. And the professor puts this up and says, "What's that? What's missing?" And I screamed out, "Power." And everybody turned around and looked at me and figured, well, I must know this guy, or I must have taken the class before. And I did. I was a little embarrassed at the time, but I actually felt good about it afterwards. I got it. And this is incredibly important. Do not confuse these three things with power. You've got to have all of them. Otherwise, you don't have any power. Now, why am I telling you this? Because as you get, I don't know if some of you have part-time jobs or you've worked before, you've come back to school, but whatever your situation is, whenever you get into the real world, you're going to want to make sure that you understand who's got each of these things. I was at Novartis, big pharmaceutical company, visiting there about a year ago. And a woman had, she told me she had the responsibility to do something. I sensed within 10 seconds she had absolutely no influence. Nobody was listening to her when she was speaking at the meeting. It didn't matter whether she had the authority to sign something. Nothing was ever going to get done through her. I stopped listening to her. I had no interest. I wanted to know immediately who her boss was and figure out how to go up the chain. You may say that's cold, it's calculating. She has no idea, by the way. I was very pleasant about it. She had no idea what I was when I was trying to maneuver my way around. This is unbelievably important in business. You cannot forget this. It's the one thing. What you want to do is not only just get power, but expand each of these overlaps, get more, so that it's almost 3 concentric circles. That should be your goal. Yes?
Why is responsibility part of that? Can't that be like delegated?
You don't have the responsibility. So let's take, we're talking today about high tech. So somebody says, well, we have to figure out how to get some new software. Who's going to do it? Who's the person they're going to pin the rose on to say, that's you, I want you to do as opposed to him? That's your responsibility. So you've got to do this, and all the Gantt charts that come back, they have your name, your date. People will work for you. You can delegate pieces of that, but at the end of the day, you want your name on top of that thing. You want to have the responsibility. People want to go to you, and you want people to know that you're the person who's in charge of that. Now, there's a good and there's bad. If you don't get it done, there's some real serious issues. But you want that.
Just one question.
Yes.
Venn diagram, is this like just a small part of all of these these criteria, or is this like A plus B plus C? Is this like how is power?
Yeah, you need all of it. It's where they overlap that's important. Power is right in here. So you don't have, if you have just the authority and the influence, you're up here. You have no power. You've got to have all three. It's really important. You want to have a little fun with it. This is something. So what happens when narcissism, self-love, attention deficit disorder, and stalking? Anybody have any idea what happens when these three? This has nothing to do with the course. I just loved this when I saw this. Anybody have any idea what happens when all three of those things happen? Well, to me, that's Twitter. That's exactly what the problem is. Twitter, if you think about Twitter, it is really the combination of stalking and narcissism and deficit disorder. But that's just try to be a little humor. Okay, so in Israel, we'll talk about any startup first. These three elements are to create power or to create success in a startup. And what I've done here is for Startup Nation, which you've all read, or at least glanced at, so you know what I'm talking about here. I've got this entrepreneurship in dark type, in the middle with financing and management and light type. And that's why when a couple of you brought up management, I said not so much. In Israel, fantastic entrepreneurship. And if you don't get that from Startup Nation, then you haven't read the book. That's clear what happens when you come out of the IDF. You are just bursting with 1,000 ideas. Financing, there are some venture funds, there are some investment banks, but there's not a whole lot of financing. Most companies in Israel get their financing here. Now, at Chiasma, I have both. But I've been around the industry a long time, so people know me. Management, not so much. And I think you got that a little from Startup Nation. Management is missing in many Israeli companies. And here's the irony. Israelis would not create this slide this way. They would put management in dark. They think they're great because they've had this wonderful experience in the Army. It's good once they learn management from somebody else in high tech, but very, very difficult for them to understand that they really need help on the outside. And they did. But this is nothing to do just with Israel, it's with many foreign countries. High tech, you go to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, you'll find that there are lots of software companies, and they were either, their first CEO was usually an American or a German, not Dutch. Now after a period of 10 or 15 years, that's what happens. This fading gets to be dark. That's why people like me do what I do. We take our U.S. American management skills and we add them on to the Israeli entrepreneurship, and we introduce them and bring financing in. This Art of the Start, when Bruce first recommended it to me, I looked it up on Amazon and I said, it's going to be one of these crazy books where it's like listening to a commercial on TV at 3 in the morning, get this book, learn about management. The guy's really a good writer. I was incredibly shocked at how right he was in his conclusions. I mean, it's not a 500-page book, it's not spectacularly written in a literary style, but boom, boom, boom. If you haven't absorbed this book, absorb it. This guy is right on almost everything he says. It was like reading my life. Part of Startup Nation is reading my life. Oh my God, I know all these people. This is what I do every day, and I've done this for years. And then I read his book and say, oh my God, it's my time in California. That's what I do every day, with the venture financing and all that. It's a really good book. Okay, so I wanted to tell a little bit about how to get successful. And there are some terrific companies that you've heard of, and I'm going to give you 3 examples. Smith, Kline, and French, which you may not have heard of, but I'll tell you why in a minute. MySpace and Pfizer Medical Systems. Pfizer Medical Systems was a division of Pfizer. MySpace you've heard of, even though it's not what it used to be. Smith, Kline, French is now actually a division of another drug. But it used to be the 5th biggest drug company. Pfizer Medical Systems was the first people. Anybody know what CT scanners are? Sometimes you call them CAT. CT, you all know what CT is? Yes. Yeah. Pfizer invented it. I was part of the team that was involved in this. Actually, I was the only person on the team that voted against this deal. So what they did and this shows you the power of the CEO. Since I was the only person who voted against the acquisition, he put me on the board of the company, because that way he knew I would have to take some responsibility for what was happening. A very smart move on his part. So these are companies with tremendously deep pockets, great brand names, but colossal failures. And you can say, well, wait a minute, they're terrific companies, they have an enormous amount of money, and great management. Why did they fail? How did they fail? And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this, I'm going to show you what they did, because it's not preordained. You can have every duck lined up in a row. It means nothing unless you do it until you carry out the business plan intelligently. So let me give you some examples. Smith, Kline, and French. Tagamet. You ever heard of Tagamet? It was the first billion-dollar drug in the world. Cimetidine is the generic name. Tagamet is the trade name. Bruce, are you the only one who actually heard the name Tagamet? Anyone else ever heard the name Tagamet? That's actually my point. They were a billion-dollar drug, the first billion-dollar drug. And SmithKline rose to number 5 in the world rankings in Philadelphia. And they sat around and did nothing. It's an anti-ulcer drug. And every gastroenterologist in the world wanted to be associated with SmithKline, SKF. And they did absolutely nothing. Tiny little company in England had a called Glaxo, had a little generic company in North Carolina. Generic drugs. But they came up with a superior product, and they destroyed SmithKline and French. They failed to do any research in this area. They failed to build upon the success that they had. What happens? Ironically enough, this company, which was worth billions, Glaxo was worth 10 or 20 million, within 3 or 4 years, Glaxo bought SmithKline and French. And now the second biggest drug company in the world, Glaxo, after Pfizer, is SmithKline and French. It just disappeared inside Glaxo, and Tagamet went away. A colossal blunder. So if you have a market share leadership position, don't fail to invest in what you're doing, because otherwise you'll get destroyed. Pfizer Medical Systems. You know Pfizer over here in 42nd Street? Drug company. We introduced the CT scanner. We bought a company in Cambridge called American Science and Engineering in 1976. I thought it was a disaster. I thought they never should have done this. Why? Well, because you've heard of GE and Siemens and Picker. These are the device companies. They really know devices. Pfizer thought it could do anything because it was a big company and had a lot of money. Now, how did I know? I was 29 years old. How did I know that this was going to be a disastrous acquisition? I wasn't a genius about this, but I'm going to tell you something that I did that should be a lesson to you all. It's called do your homework. So when we were about to do the acquisition, I was told that Yale Medical School in New Haven had a scanner, and I should go see it, understand it, how it's being used, check it out. So I did, and I went there. And I spent the day with a very senior guy who walked me all around the lab. The amount of equipment at Yale was astounding to me. Every piece of radiology you could imagine. To point to my story, at the end of the day, he had his little badge on, and his name, his badge, Yale University Medical School. I thanked him and I said, "Oh, Dr. So-and-so, thank you very much." He said, "Oh, I'm not a doctor." I said, "Well, but you've been interacting with patients and you know everything about this equipment and that and that." He goes, "Oh, my pass." He said, "Well, Yale kind of gives me a pass." He said, "I work for GE. I'm their site manager." And it suddenly occurred to me that Pfizer could invent any new piece of technology it wanted, But the people who were going to use it, Pfizer had no idea that these equipment was so, all of the equipment was associated with GE or Siemens or Picker. They had their own people there. They had people there training doctors, people doing service. Pfizer just thought it could sell equipment like it sells drugs. A total and complete disaster. We lost $200 million, which doesn't sound like that much money these days. But if you go back, the equivalent is about $2 billion. This tanked the stock. So this was a very, very big deal. So it's the radiologist and the hospital controller. You have to know who you're selling to. So Pfizer thought it was selling, it could sell anything because they knew doctors. It was a big, big mistake. MySpace. You all know MySpace much better than I do. So it was way ahead of Facebook. And they sold themselves 6 years ago for $580 million. Doesn't sound like much when Facebook is worth $50 billion. But that was a shocker 6 years ago. $580 million sold to Rupert Murdoch. Everybody thought that was an astronomical number. Specific Media bought it for $35 million earlier this year. And they lost last year, just in the fourth quarter alone, they lost $156 million. Their music and entertainment site, and they've been just totally cluttered. Yet they were there years ahead of Facebook. Basically, it's AOL. I mean, I grew up with AOL, dial-up, dead, and that's the same thing that happened to MySpace. So, if there's one thing in common, another question I'm going to ask all of you, what do you think is a word that would characterize the failures of these big companies? As why did they all fail? What one word might capture everything about their behavior? Anybody have any idea? One word. Yes?
Complacent?
It's not the word, but that is a good word.
Hubris.
Yeah. What?
Hubris.
Hubris. Do you know what hubris is? Does everybody know the Greek word hubris? No. All right. So we're gonna go for an English word. It's close to hubris. Anybody have any idea what? So, Pfizer. We know doctors.
Too sure of their knowledge. And
Say it again.
Too sure of their knowledge and not innovative.
Yes, but what happened? What's the word when you're very, very self-assured?
Cocky. Arrogant.
Arrogance. Perfect. Cocky is part of it. It's exactly these companies. My company, Pfizer, when I went to them and I said, listen, we're not going to be able to sell into the radiology suite. We don't understand radiology. We don't understand gear. We don't understand service contracts. That's not what we do. And they said, oh, please, we know doctors. It's the most arrogant thing I've ever seen. I was completely humiliated in front of a crowd. 3 years later, I was right, but that didn't matter very much. My options weren't worth anything because Pfizer stock got crushed. Arrogance. It is, the Greek word is hubris, which means so much arrogance. It's like arrogance cubed. It's actually a better word. Be very, very careful as you go through your business career. Watch out for the arrogant people. When you run into people who are arrogant, it's like kryptonite. Stay away from them. I don't care how smart they are. But you're never going to win with those people. And you've got to stay away. And if they're pushing a business plan, walk away from the business plan. Don't invest in it. Not a good idea. So, let's talk about the real world. And I want to talk a little bit about biotech. But biotech, but you can think of high-tech or software, video, it's all the same. What I call stage 0 is the concept stage. Business plan on a napkin. I've done this once. You sit around, you talk to somebody, I've got a really great idea. You don't really have a company, you haven't formed any legal entity, you haven't put any money in. You do your informal brainstorming, your networking, you get your people together, maybe you assemble a board of people who will come onto a board. Okay, you do that. That's stage 0. If you're serious, you go into stage 1, which in our cases, you put a little lab together, or you contract out for somebody else, or in the case of software, you say to some nerds, go away and write some code. You've got a few employees, it's very informal, everybody calls each other by their first name. Oh, we don't have a CEO, we have a couple of partners, everybody reports to everybody else, very informal. These are the seeds of disaster, by the way, but that's okay. But that's stage 1 of startup. Then you get serious. You focus. At a certain point in time, you say, you know what? I've got to get serious, otherwise my business is going to go out of control. I've now got 50 people, 30 people. I'm a real organization. I've got to raise some money. I just can't go to friends and ask them to put in hundreds of thousands here and there. I've got to go on a formal process. I've got to go on a road show and raise money. And I've got to put some structure in my. I've got 75 people and 30 of them are reporting directly to me. This is insane. I can't get anything done. Then you go to a period, if you last this far, of integration. And for ours in biotech, it's the last phase of testing before you go to the FDA. You're now a serious company. You can have 100 employees. You have real infrastructure in the company. You probably get partnerships with some big pharma companies or a big biotech. And you've now got really formal structures. You've got operating plans, you've got human resource plans. You're a real company. And then finally, there's the last stage, which is optimization. By the way, I call this 0 to 4. You could call it 1 to 5. I specifically call this 0, however, because you really had nothing here. So I think it's a little pompous to call it stage 1. But stage 4, you're a real company, and you're going to see one when you go to Israel and Iskar. Bruce mentioned Buffett bought it. He bought 80% of it for $4.1 billion. It's a family that owned the company. That family's invested in my company. A really good family to know. They're actually an excellent group. But this is where you want to be. It's really hard to get there. I would say in biotech, there have been 50 companies that have ever made profit, and probably been 5,000 created. So it's rare. The company that I started out in the West Coast, that I was chairman and CEO of, we're not there anymore. It's 13 years, break even. It has a market cap of $3 billion because it's going to be very profitable, but still just break even after 13 years. Now, you brought up management before somebody else talked about management. So I want to just tell you something about management. I've alluded to this in the beginning. These are just symbols just to talk about these informal relationships. It's a couple people sitting around. And it gets increasingly complex when you have hierarchies and structures and reporting relationships. You have to write monthly reports, and you've got a human resources department. I've got the lightning bolt in the middle because that's when the problems really start, in stage 2. When you've got real people, you've got to raise money, because when you raise money, the venture guys want a seat at the table. These are your friends or people that you've known who'll give you some money. They don't want a board seat. They don't really even care about what you do. I like you. You made money before. Here's a check for $500,000. Okay, you want $30 million. It's going to be 3 funds at $10 million each. Suddenly, 3 people you've never met are going to be on your board of directors. They're not nice. They're pretending to be nice. They only care about the rate of return they're going to get. So there's going to be friction that you cannot even imagine. That's why many people don't go the venture route. They say, I'll never do that. That's when the problems start. You hire people, they don't work out, you have to fire them. That's harder to do. Now you've got contracts, you've got to pay them off, you've got severance, they sue you. This is the real world. This happens all the time. Doesn't really happen here. You can kind of muddle your way through in the beginning. As soon as you become a real organization, management, management, management. You notice one of the earlier slides I talked about Israel where I had the management lightened out because they don't have very much of it. Imagine when you're not good at senior management and yet you've got a good technology, you put a company together, that is a recipe for disaster. That's why a lot of the venture funds find people like me and send us over to Israel to help. And we're doing two things. Number one, we're trying to rescue or help companies, but two, we're trying to train the next generation so that people there will grow up to look like, well, I hope they look like Robert Redford and not me, but behave like me, if not more. That was a joke. Okay, so how does this all relate to Israel and IT? Well, why are there so many startups in Israel? You read the book. Why aren't there? Nobody has any idea why there's so many startups in Israel?
People are used to taking risks.
That's one reason. And where do they assume that risk?
First is the military career, I believe.
Yeah, the idea.
Yeah, and the neighborhood itself is really, I mean, they have enemies all around, so they are at risk all the time.
Risk is very good. Why else are so many technology startups? Yes?
Yeah, culture of challenging authority and like the status quo.
Very much so, right. Yes?
Multicultural. Multicultural.
Yeah, multicultural. That's actually very important. In my company, we've got 48 people born in 24 countries. So probably we speak about 30 or 35 languages. And it's, so technology is a way everyone is math or science. So it's a way to bring everybody together. Yes.
I think one of the reasons what one of the speakers we heard about on technology, what they said was it was easy to transfer technology because it was over internet rather than hard goods which they had to they couldn't transport because of the Arab countries and.
I think it's a fair point too.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the Israeli speakers actually told about this.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Any other?
You have how many nationalities in Israel?
How many what?
Nationalities.
In Israel?
Yeah.
Oh, as many as in the United States, almost.
Yeah, I think it's 70 or something. I forgot.
Yeah, it's a
in
huge
this book
number.
is mentioned.
And why are there so many entrepreneurs? Why do people here? When I graduated business school, everybody wanted to go work for. Then it was Smith Barney. Now it's Goldman, but they wanted to work for the big consulting firms. They wanted to work for the Pfizers of the world. They wanted to work for the big banks. But now Israel doesn't do that. People graduate or get out of the idea they don't want to go work for Goldman Sachs in Israel. Why?
Well, in the book it was talking about how people, if they already are comfortable and they can go into a job, they're not going to be willing to take risks. But a lot of the people that were immigrating from the Soviet Union, the people that were coming to Israel, they had nothing to lose, so that they were willing to invent new things, willing to take risks. If they failed, they would go back and do it again because it wasn't as bad as long as they learned from their initial risk.
That's good. Anybody else? Why there's so many entrepreneurs?
It's a way to create value, kind of towards his point with the lack of natural resources.
Yep. Any
Or
other ideas?
immigrations.
Sorry?
Or immigrations.
R&D migration,
Immigrations.
R&D immigration.
Just immigration.
Explain.
Many people are is immigrant from other countries, right?
Right.
They have to start up something.
Especially if their Hebrew isn't good, that's true.
So because the country is new and people are new, so they have to start up something. So that's it.
Okay. There's a question. There's a hand over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just think it's because there aren't a lot of large companies in Israel, like Goldman Sachs and companies that have been around for a long time and like people associate with success and making money.
That was very true a few years ago. Now what you see is there are branches of companies, and so Intel and Motorola and National Semiconductor and a lot of the big banks and investment banks. My accountants in Israel are Ernst & Young. What they did was they went out, E&Y, and bought a small Israeli. That's what they do, is they buy companies. So that was very true a few years ago. It's a little less true now, but it's a good point.
Almost every single person goes to the military there, so they build a very strong sense of like leadership and
Right?
self-motivated, so they see themselves going into business for themselves, maybe at a higher level than working for someone else, because they feel that
Yeah.
they have the skills necessary because of the war.
Good point. All these are good points. There's one other point which I'm not going to tease out of you because I don't think I'll get it out of you, and I just want to give it to you. There's a social thing that goes on here in the U.S. which does not go on in Israel. And that social thing is when you reach a certain age, and let's say you live in the suburbs or you live on the Upper West Side, and you want to be able to say, well, I work for Goldman, or I work for Pfizer, or I work for Time Magazine. There's a prestige associated with those firms in some social circles here in the U.S. That doesn't exist in Israel. You don't score points at a cocktail party by saying that you work for Intel. Nobody cares. And it's actually an important point because it tells you a lot about the society. Here we have pecking orders. Gee, he works for Exxon. I guess he's they don't think of it that way. And Western Europe is a lot like the U.S. So that's very, very important. Now, the book also talked about why is this different from Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan? Yes.
Because their culture teaches not to fail, so they'd be ashamed to fail, so they can't learn from their failure.
That's a big part of it. By the way, the quality of products from those three countries is unbelievably high. The efficiency is sensational. The firms are first rate. But a lot of it is not innovation there. They'll do the contract manufacturing, or they will do the call centers and things like that. But a lot of the intellectual property does not start. I think eventually it might. I think it's actually going to at some point in time. Perhaps when some of the more successful people who have come here, been in business here, and then go back, bring their kids back to their home country. I think they're going to bring some of that. But Israel is very, very different. Israel does not have the kind of immense factories. They have some. I mean, Intel has a big facility over there, but they don't do the scale of manufacturing that those places do. Those places are sensational. Now, going back to the real world, I want to give you some examples. In the three things that we're here to talk about today are entrepreneurship, financing, and management. This is the exact same thing I put up before. There's nothing different about this. So let's talk a little bit about Chiasma as a surrogate for almost every other company. When I got there 3.5 years ago, this early stage, I was told to go over there by the venture guys, take a look at the company and see if I wanted to get involved. And as there were only about 8 or 10 people, I went over with a few board members and we all sat around. The business strategy was terrible. Terrible. It made no sense. And I sat there and they were talking about how to improve this and how to change that. Well, if the foundation on your house is like this instead of this, you can do all the most wonderful things about putting the beautiful architecture, but eventually it's going to collapse. Your strategy has got to be good. Nobody ever challenged the strategy. So the first question I said was, if we follow your strategy and you win, how are you going to make any money? How are you going to increase your value? You're venture guys. How are you going to get paid back? And by the way, does anybody know, what does a venture capitalist look for in terms of rate of return on investment? Have any idea?
High growth. Very high growth, very big return.
Number. What's a number?
300%-400%.
100.
What?
10 times.
10. 10. And I'm going to tell you how and why they don't get 10 every time.
10 times or?
10 times in 3 years. Now, rare that happens, but that's what they want. And it's called 10x, T-E-N-E-X. That's what they just talk about. They talk about 10x. People say, well, what is that? It's 10x. That's all it is. And they like it in 3 years. Very rare that it happens. So I said, how are you guys going to get your 10x? I said, you're going to get a negative return on this, even if you're wildly successful. Well, they were pretty nervous about that. If right at the beginning, I'm going to show you some slides that talk about this, about terms of challenging the business strategy. So we changed the business strategy literally overnight. The beauty was it's in Israel. We had a meeting, we changed the business strategy, it was done. It was nobody went to anybody else, nobody had to write any big memos. It made sense. We said, that's great. After 2 days, done. Couldn't do it here. Back to my Pfizer days. At Pfizer, if you wanted to change your business strategy, here's the analogy. Take a 1,000-foot tanker. It's going to land in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. When they're 400 miles out, they say, I got to get over there. They move this, a quarter of a degree. 4 days later, they slowly get into port. That's what big companies do. You just can't change a big company. But here we said, don't like the strategy? Well, what's your idea? Okay, let's do it. Done. Next day we had a new strategy. One of the things, I was there about 6 months, and Novartis, the big drug company in Basel, came knocking. And they had an idea for us. They wanted to do a deal with us. Most people say, my God, this is like manna from heaven. This is fantastic. A big company wants to do a deal. So I went to Basel, and it was one of the stupidest deals I've ever heard of, and incredibly one-sided. But we were a very small company, and they said, here's a couple $1 million, and we could start it and do this and do that. It was all very, very nice people, and they were all very smiling, and everyone is happy. And so after lunch, I said, so is this something you'd like to take back and do? And I said, actually, what I'm thinking of doing is going home early. I'm going to catch an earlier flight. I said, because it makes no sense to me. And they were total silence. So I said, what I am going to do is I'm going to go, and I appreciate it very much. And I said, very nice, nice people. But I said, I won't even be responding to this. It made no sense. So when I got back, everybody said, oh my God, how did you do that? And what was their reaction? And the board's going to kill you. And I said, the board isn't going to kill me. This is a rotten deal. And I'm not going to, just because Novartis is going to throw a couple $1 million. As you ever heard the term buyer's remorse? Do you know what that means? 10 seconds after you buy something, you say, the Homer Simpson, dumb. I made a big stupid mistake. That's what it would have been. So you have to have, this goes back to management, which is lightened out here. You have to have the capability to be able to say no. One thing Bruce said in the introduction was, I've done 18 mergers or major licensing deals. The reason I've been able to be successful in doing those deals is my favorite word in the English language is
No.
no. It's the first word out, even if I think a deal is great. Please, guys. No. Always no. No matter, even if you're desperate, you can't make your payroll next week, the firm's about to go under, if they want your deal, they're going to give you more money. Just say no. Be polite. It's not something.
What about you say no, they don't want to buy it?
Then you go to somebody else. Don't ever do a deal because you're desperate. 5 minutes after that deal, you're going to say it was the stupidest thing I ever did. And the irony is, I'll guarantee this, the day you accept a bad deal, the next day somebody will come along and say, oh, why, if you had only told me, I would have topped that bid. Don't ever do a bad deal. And you can always get a bad deal to be a good deal by saying no, if somebody wants it. If somebody wants what you have. Now, you have to be able, at a certain point in time, you have to say yes. You can't always say no, but at the beginning, always say no. It'll serve you very well. So at Omrix, where you're going to go see both Chiasma and Omrix. Omrix is very successful. We sold it to Johnson & Johnson. So at a later stage, stage 3, where they had probably 200 employees, what was the issue? We're thinking of going public. How do you dress them up to go public? These are the entrepreneurs. These are the people who were in the IVF, thought they know everything. They don't know. They may have visited New York. They don't know venture funds here, institutional investors. They'll never dress in a tie. They'll always try to correct people. If you're trying to sell stock and you go to an institutional investor, Fidelity, one of the biggest ones in Boston. So I'm going to give you a real life situation. You're all young, much younger than me. Usually when you go to Fidelity, the analysts are 28 to 32 years old. I'm more than twice that. So I have to sit there and listen to people who know absolutely nothing tell me what's wrong with my business. Because maybe they hold a PhD in molecular biology, so they think they know what we're doing. It has nothing to do with what we're doing, but have to be respectful. Now, I've been in the game a long time, so when some young person says something to me which is outrageous, and they don't ask me a question, they tell me something, and they're dead wrong, I don't say, you're a jerk, you have no idea what you're talking about, this is absurd. That's what I'm saying inside, right? What comes out is, you know, I never thought about it that way. Let me go and think about it a little bit. And that's all. They're just talking to show how smart they are. They don't even remember the question 2 seconds later. An Israeli, however, coming over here, and somebody tells him something, says, what are you talking about? You don't know a damn thing. And boom, boom, boom. Is he going to get his money on the IPO? No way. No way. So how do I dress these people up as a really serious issue? Smart? Whoa, were they smart. Did they know their stuff? Make clotting factors. In surgery, what Omrix does, if you're having surgery and a surgeon nicks an artery or a vein or the bladder or the prostate in a man, blood starts to spurt out. Fast bleed. And let me tell you, when you see on TV these surgeons who come out with white uniforms, no, it looks like a butcher shop. Bleeders, it comes all over you. They have technology which you put inside. The surgeon takes his hands and puts inside around a broken vessel or tissue and stops the bleeding. It's really profound stuff. They know their stuff. The technology is great. That's why J&J bought the company for $438 million. How do you dress these people up for an IPO? It's not an easy thing to do, but Israeli companies generally cannot do IPOs on their own. they need help, either from people like me as chairman or CEO, or they have to really be trained. Because the natural tendency is, as you say, somebody's in the IDF, and they're supposed to challenge your general. Challenge your general in the United States Army, you're court-martialed. If you don't challenge in Israel, you're court-martialed. But you can't take that attitude on Wall Street. You will get slaughtered. So that was my biggest challenge here. So if you were ever in a situation where you're trying to raise money, regardless of what your background is, what your company's involved with, remember that it's how you respond which is critical for them to give you money. Very important lesson I'm going to pass on to you. Sometimes people, let's pretend now that you're one of the institutional, you're Fidelity, and I'm coming in to pitch my business, the art of the start. I'm pitching you for a public offering. Maybe you'll throw out something which is very provocative that you don't believe in, and it's very inflammatory. Maybe you're doing that to test my reaction, because they want to see, how is this guy under pressure? So I'll say something truly obnoxious, and if I'm obnoxious back, even if I'm right, that sends a signal we're not investing. We are not investing with this guy. But if they say something that's really inflammatory or obnoxious, and I say, you know, I don't see it that way. Can we talk offline at the end of the meeting? I want to know more about that. That answers their question. I'm not somebody who's going to be a hothead. I'm going to listen to other people. They invest in people. Their technology. Do you all know Krispy Kreme? Can somebody tell me what the proprietary nature of that product is? Where's the intellectual property?
The recipe.
Donuts.
The recipe.
Anyone can make a delicious, fatty, wonderful. There's no intellectual property. None. The recipe, anyone can duplicate.
It's a brand management. It's like the image they created for themselves.
They had management that had run a successful food company before you. So all the investors cared about. These people made money for them previously. They'll make money. They couldn't care whether Krispy Kreme tasted like crap. Didn't matter to them. Absolutely didn't. So Bruce rattled off a whole list of companies that I've run. I haven't run those companies because I'm a genius in any of these technologies. Does anybody have any idea why people keep asking me to run companies? It goes back to a word that begins with T that I talked about 10 minutes ago. It's a noun for a number. 10. I've gotten 10x for people many times. So when I come along and they go, oh, yeah, we'll invest with him, I could be, my products could be crap. Now they're not, and they trust me that they won't be crap. But I make money for them. That's all they care about. At BioMarin in San Francisco, I made the investors 16.2x in 15 months. My wife says I could show up at their house naked on a Saturday night and run around the house, and they would say, oh, come on in, hey, he made me money. Money, people care about money. That's all they care about. And if you make money, you can do it again. So you've got to be able to make sure that that whenever you're surrounding yourself to raise money, you have to do it with people who understand how to behave.
You make this company's 10x, right? At what stage does this actually happen? When they go to IPO and they...
Well, we took the company public, and then the investors, I don't want to get technical, but after a public offering, investors, institutional investors and employees have to sign an agreement that says they won't sell stock for 6 months. And after that 6-month period, they can sell stock, but according to a certain SEC regulation. So they can only bleed out some stock a little bit at a time. Unless you can arrange what's called a block sale. So if somebody has 2 million shares, the day after the lockup period, 6 months and 1 day, you can cross a block, sell it from the venture fund to Fidelity. And that's what we did. We crossed a block of about 2 million shares. And made a lot of money for these guys. Now, they were happy. Stock tripled after that. They weren't upset. They left a lot of money on the table. They made 16x. They were very happy. And they got de-risked, which is very important. So this is incredibly important. Just because you have technology or a good business plan doesn't mean you're going to get money. So the last thing about Omrix was a certain point in time we had a partnership with Johnson & Johnson for a limited number of products in a limited territory. Everybody in the company said, oh, now we know what to do. We're Israelis. We've watched what J&J does. We can take the other products to other territories and do it ourselves. Big plan presented to me, and I said, not a chance. Not a chance. There's a reason J&J is successful. Look at the organization they have. Look at the relationship they have with anesthesiologists in the surgery suites. We don't have those relationships. And the answer was, sell the company to J&J. So a company that had been valued at $68 million, 3 years later sold for $438 million. Nothing really happened. Products were a little further along, a little more in sales, a little better in development. But 5 times in 3 years, we know how to sell. Your company is like a box of cornflakes. This is true. Okay. I'm an institutional investor. I have my shopping cart. How many stocks are on the New York Stock Exchange? 3,000. American Stock Exchange, 1,000. NASDAQ, 4,000. Plus, forget the European market. So there's 7,000, 8,000 companies, right? They all want. They're on the shelf. Each company, instead of Kellogg's cornflakes and Post cornflakes, all the companies are on both sides. And as the institutional investors walk down with their shopping carts, everybody says, buy me, buy me, buy me. That's what goes on. There's only a small number of stocks you can buy. Which ones are you going to take? If you start thinking about it that way, you're amazed that any institutional investor would buy any of these companies. So how do they do it? The companies that are on the shelf that get bought realize they have to sell themselves. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't want to get into that now. It's very important. Okay. It always comes down to management. It always comes down. People give money to people. Write it in your brain, write it here in your palm. People give money to people. That's what they do. They don't give money for anything else. Yes, you have to have technology. But in case of Krispy Kreme, you don't. So if you have a great idea, like Krispy Kreme, you can get money if you've done it before. But you couldn't do Krispy Kreme if you said, I'm going to produce a delicious 1,000-calorie donut. People say you're out of your mind. But you've had another little food company, you've had an exit for 5 or 10x, and you say, I'm going to do a 1,000-calorie donut. People say, that's great. Let's give them the money. It makes no sense, but it does make sense. People give money to people. So these are all the business issues. These are all the things. And where did I get some of those things from? From The Art of the Start. I had some, and I added them up. This Gary, is it Kawasaki? Is that his name?
Guy
What's the guy?
Guy.
I just thought he was just great. This book is really terrific.
I wouldn't assign a bad book.
No, but it's better than I think even than what you think. It's a great book, but it always comes down to management. Okay. Now, in our area, since this is technology and entrepreneurship, technology is important. There's no Krispy Kremes. So that's the people give money to people. So these are the things that you need to have in a business. And you say, well, this is obvious. Yes, it's all obvious. But I bolded a reasonable timetable and backup plans for mid-course corrections. Because these are the things that get screwed up most often. We'll do it, we'll get it done mid-year next year. Mid-year next year, it's not done. What happens? If you're the CEO, goodbye. Goodbye and good luck. You're out. You've got to have reasonable timetables. It's better to say at the outset, I'm not going to have this drug approved for 3.5 years, and here's why, and here's the Gantt chart that shows you. You can ask me to get it done in 2 years. It can't get done. You don't want to go the other way and then say it's 5 years and build 1.5 years of extra in. That's not fair. So that's why I call it a reasonable timetable. Everything is going to get screwed up at all times. You have to have backup plans. When you're presenting a plan at the outset, this is something else which I think you've got to remember. Always tell people what the risks are, what could go wrong, and what you're going to do if it does go wrong. Do it at the start. Because if you do it when it's happening, when you've got the screw up, you're out on your ass. They don't care. Tell them beforehand, here are the 6 things that are going to go wrong. Let me give you an example. I just had a meeting with the FDA, big meeting with the FDA, very important meeting. And prior to the meeting, I wrote a memo to the board and I said, we're asking them 18 questions. Here's what we hope. Here's what may happen. I'm not going to give you the good stuff, because you all know if it's good what's going to happen. Here are the negatives with each of these, and here's what we will do if the FDA says, sorry, I'm not going to allow you to do this, you have to do that instead of this. That was wonderful. Because you think I got all 18 things I asked for? No. I got about 14 things I asked for, and 4 I didn't get. They asked us to do other things. Is my board angry with me? No, because I had told them at the beginning of the summer, this is exactly what we will do. Here's our backup plan if they say you can't do this. And here's what we'll do, how we'll do it, how much money it's going to take, and how much extra time it's going to be. For the things, that's what happened. And so we had backup plans. But what? Imagine if I hadn't done that? We went into the meeting and said, we're going to ask these 18 questions. And they said, well, what happened here? And you can't say, well, 14 out of 18 is 7 out of 9. I'm hitting 750. That's a fantastic batting average. No. You screwed up on 4 things, and you didn't get it. And it's going to cost us X millions of dollars more and more time. So tell them beforehand. So Israel, lots of high-tech companies. I put this slide up here for a particular reason. Does anybody, sorry, I think, I'm not wearing my glasses. Okay. Forget this one. Anybody have any idea why I put that one up on the right? it says Spotlight on Israel, just from a website, Israel High-Tech Industry, 50 Years of Excellence. It's a PR piece, it's a puff piece on high-tech. It's all true, but it's a puff piece. Anybody have any idea why I put that up there? Anything leap out at you? Yeah, this side. Yeah, it's interesting, but that's not. It's staring you in the face. It's in the top half.
They're giving access to their technology to other countries, whether it's foreign, because they know that they can't do it. They're asking for help.
Yes, but that's not why I put it. First line.
Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Ah, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's the State Department. If this were the U.S., what would that be? No, not in a million years.
Yeah, the Small Business Administration?
Small Business Administration, the Commerce Department, Finance Department, Secretary of the Treasury. You think Hillary Clinton, I don't mean Hillary as a person, you think the State Department would get in? No. But in Israel, this is put out by the State Department. Well, what does that mean? On the pecking order of things, would you rather be backed by the Small Business Administration or the Secretary of State? Yeah. You want to go to where the power is. That's Israel. You don't see that in other countries. That's remarkable. And I see it all the time in Israel. It's the highest levels of government promote business and technology. Does not happen here. Okay. So, pitching a business. Guy's book. This is what happened in Germany when the projector died. I'm making a presentation in Germany a couple of years ago. I get up there, projector doesn't work. Why? I have a Macintosh. They'd never seen Macintoshes. They couldn't figure out how to put them together. I don't. By the way, I always carry, if they had just asked me, I would have given them a flash drive. They could have put it on their Dell, but they didn't ask me. So I get up as institutional investors, and I have no slides. No slides. I make an announcement that they didn't want to say it was because of a Macintosh. They simply said, unfortunately, Mr. Price's slides, there's been a screw up and we have no slides. I ignored that. So I take out my, pretend this is a laser printer, a laser pointer, and I said, well, I just want to point out the most important thing here, and I point to this blank section of it, and I start talking as if my slides were up there. And then I go like this, and I push to the next slide, and it's another blank. And I gave the I went through this, and I gave the presentation. And the people in the audience are like this. So after about the third slide, I said, remember, it's Germany. I said, that's a joke. And they all laughed hysterically. You have to tell the Germans it's okay to laugh. But the point of it was, I sold more stock on that roadshow than any other roadshow I've ever been on. Why? Because when they said that the projector didn't work, instead of saying, I don't know, I can't do a presentation, maybe I can, maybe I'll switch with somebody else and I'll go later in the conference and this and that. No. Because I went forward and I had fun, and by the way, I gave the presentation. I don't need slides for a presentation. And so they're saying they're investing in me. So that's what happened when the projector does. So the one thing I would have added to Guy's book is that, okay, I'll wrap it up for 10 minutes.
Yep. Okay.
Is to understand that just always remember they're giving money to you. So on pages 51 and 52, 10 slides. If you can't tell your business in 10 slides, go back, redo the slides. and then explain how you're gonna make money. These concept slides are great, but people want to know, I'm putting in $3 million. I want to get $20 million out of this. How am I going to do it? Go back and photocopy this page, these 2 pages, the most important pages in the book. So, having technology is one thing, building value is another. Build value. I want to tell you, I want to take each of these things very quickly. Everybody, please read this. I get out to BioMarin. This is a public company. On every press release, you know, after the press release, they say what the company does. Read it. Read it fast. Bruce, what does BioMarin do? What do they do?
Right.
Can you figure it out?
Yes.
I can't figure it out, and I was the CEO. Genetic diseases, burns, what's the correlation? Systemic fungal infections, psoriasis, a diagnostic subsidiary? No wonder the stock stunk. No wonder people were interested. That's what I put on the bottom of the press release. Oh, okay. I know what you do. Focus, focus, focus. You've heard about the elevator speech? Any of you ever heard that term, the elevator speech? You get in the elevator, somebody says, what do you do for a living? By the time you hit the 2nd floor, you got 5 seconds. That's it. Tell them what you do. Oh, we develop orphan drugs, serious diseases. Done. They're out of the elevator. They know exactly what I do. Next point. Very important point. These are the basic stages in drugs from discovery through commercialization. I've just put the blue in there because my particular company today is here. It could be here. 2 things they do, because some companies just do this. This is just for illustrative purposes. Stay in your area of expertise. It's called temptation creep. If you get in development, you say, I can go back and I can do discovery. If you're manufacturing, you say, I know how to sell. No, you don't. Not until you make money. Not until you're very successful. Stay within your boundaries. Under promise, over deliver. Don't tell them something's going to happen next year unless you're 100% sure it's going to happen. Write this down. Plan for failure, not on failure. Planning for failure is what I talked about before. I'm going to tell them what's going to happen if things get screwed up and how I'm going to fix it. But don't plan on failure, plan for failure. Skip that. I'm going to skip what we do, not important. This is very important. I've got a drug in development. I'm going to launch it in the 2nd quarter of 2014. I've been working since early this year. It'll be 3.5 years planning for the commercial launch. Why are you doing all that? Because if you don't do this years in advance, you will never, ever get the value out of your products. Doesn't matter if it's biotech, software, high-tech. You've got to plan for your launch years in advance. Okay, for startup nation companies, usually it's a reliance on binary outcomes. It's going to work, it's going to fail. That's what technology has. Watch that. They're a real problem. See if you can avoid a binary outcome. Always going to have missed timelines, organizational chaos, just a matter of what's going to happen. There's no long-range plan. You're worried about making payroll. And there's no reasonable forecast of profitability. This is what you're faced with in high-tech companies with entrepreneurs, and especially in Israel. The financial community will take it out on you, and your board will fire you if you screw up in any of these areas. What are the key takeaways? Who's going to sell your products? Can you make money? How much do you have to raise? What do you have to show? You heard of milestones. I'll give you this. What are you going to do with the money? What's the milestone? I'm not just going to give you. If I raise $30 million, if from my company. No one's actually going to give me 30 million on day one. The press release says I raised 30 million. They tranche it. I'll give you the first 5 million, you better show me that you've done this, and then I'll get you the next 7 million or 12 million, whatever. Each time it's tranched to milestones.
Would you equate that to like a burn rate as well, or is
Yeah, they're going to match the burn rate to a milestone, and then we'll give you that money. You don't make the milestone, we're not going to give you the money. What are the risks? In advance, tell them what the risks are and how you're going to account for them. Can you meet or exceed your timelines? Is there anything you could do? The answer may be yes, but you cut corners and you have a risk. If the board wants to do that, fine. Tell them what the opportunities are. Make sure that while you're thinking of your Krispy Kreme is going to be there forever, somebody isn't going to come up with a 2,000 calorie donut that tastes twice as good a month after you launch your product.
How do you know there's no someone else like yes, for that one it's not going to pass it?
You've got to know your market, and competitive intelligence is critical. You must know everything that's going on in your market. You must, through intellectual property exchanges, through a variety of mechanisms. You have to know. I can't stand it when people say, I'm going to hire this person, he worked for Pfizer. And there were morons at Pfizer. There were some brilliant people. Just because he worked for Pfizer. You know, I have degrees from 2 Ivy League schools. So what? I have idiots in my classes. And I had some brilliant people too. I don't care about the resumes. Show me the people who know what they're doing.
But if they don't introduce themselves, how do you know what they can do?
Because in an interview, you throw out their resume. You don't care to have them recite the resume. You ask questions that have nothing to do with their resume. Here's a question to ask somebody. You ready? Tell me how you failed in life, in anything, and what you did to overcome it. They sit there and go, get them out of your office. Somebody says, boy, did I screw up, and I'm going to tell you what I screwed up on, and this is what I learned. I don't care if they were last in their class. That's somebody I want to hire.
So you have to ask, get some failure experience from them.
Yes, some real life experience, and ask them really tough questions. Okay, I'm right near the end. You have to be able to define value for shareholders and how to measure it, whether it's 10x or 3x, whatever the circumstances are. Understand value is not a straight line. When you hit those milestones, that doesn't automatically mean your value is going to go up every time. Who are your customers? Customers aren't always sometimes the people you think they are. In my business, well, you sell to doctors. They're not my customers. Patients. Patients are my customers. I don't actually sell to them, but they're my customers. Have a backup plan. I've mentioned that a number of times. First-rate people. Surround yourself with first-rate people. There's something else. Like this may even be my last slide. There's something else you have to beyond this. You ready? You ready? I got something else too. You get it? First-rate people. There's an adage which I love. The adage goes like this. First-rate people like to surround themselves with first-rate people. Second-rate people like to surround themselves with fourth-rate people. People who are not very good want to have stupid people around them so they can look smart. I always try to hire people who are smarter than I am and smarter than the best scientists I have. I want to learn from them. I'm 65. I want to learn from them. I'm never humiliated if somebody's smarter. That's it. I did it. It's 7:30.